Welcome to the show today. I'm very excited to be here with six-time cancer survivor, Dan Hegerich. He is coming to us from Western Massachusetts, right where my sister lives, and in a beautiful part of the country. And he is talking today with us about how to stop the chemical assault on your health, which is near and dear to my heart because I can talk about the chemical assault all day long, which I pretty much do all day long. But coming from you, Dan, and your knowledge, your wisdom, your insight, your experience with cancer is so more meaningful than somebody that just tries to help educate people on things that I know. You know so much more because you've gone through this, and I can talk about chemicals and products and chemicals and food that people are eating and whatnot that could potentially be causing cancer. But hearing from you, someone that has learned, unfortunately, the real hard way, can help so many other people. So I commend you for all that you're doing to help people, whether you're on my show or you're coaching people and the work you're doing out there. So I thank you for coming on here today and opening up your soul and your heart to people that can learn from you.
Yeah, well, this is a moral obligation now. You know, it's when you have an experience and then you triumphantly rise above it, it's a moral obligation or a moral responsibility, a spiritual responsibility to share the wisdom and inspiration born out of that suffering, that conscious suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a difficult thing sometimes to come down from the mountain into the immense chaotic, delusional state that most people are under. And for me to actually try to pop that bubble, people will seem that it's offensive or there's some egotistical force driving me to do that, which is not true. This is, someone might call it tough love in some regards. So I hope that we could share some insights and inspiration for people to take back their well-being, starting with their environments. And on a side note, we could talk about those three environments that you need to really consider, right? And we'll let you have the helm here and guide the ship somewhere.
Absolutely. Well, let's start the engine and get it roaring. And I know we could go fast, we could go slow, and we could probably travel the world talking about this subject.
Certainly.
But yeah, and I know that your history of how did you get cancer? I know it's probably a long history. I heard a few of your interviews on other podcasts, and how you realized you were living basically in a cancer world. I mean, give people a little bit of information on who you are and how you got to where you are today, which, by the way,
sure.
You're also a wellness coach. I didn't even bring that, a heroic life and wellness coach and an expert in conscious healing. So besides just being the cancer survivor, you have a lot to offer here. So I'll let you take away the wheel.
So the idea is that if you don't have a philosophy of life that you have created, you're living a philosophy of life that someone else has programmed into you. And so being born in America, I was born into the American dream script, that philosophy. You go to school and then you go to higher education so you could get a good job, get paid really well. Then you can find a woman, and then you can find a house, buy a house, and then you could have children. And then you could, you know, at 25, I'm saving for retirement. I'm like really anxious about having to save for retirement at 25. It's like life is over. The only thing that matters is the golden nugget at the end of the rainbow, that pot, right? And so living that American dream, I was checking off the list. And so I got married to a woman I really, had my, I guess, immature adult love for. And started the whole process. And 6 months into that marriage, I came down severely sick and ill and had to get a biopsy on a lymph node that was about a pea size. And when I touched it, it was hard as a stone. And it radiated all the way down my right side of my body, out my foot. And I go, that's not right. That's not right at all. So I watched it, and it grew from that to an almond, and it was really going rapidly. So I went into the emergency room, and the doctor said, you got to get it, you got to get that biopsied immediately. So, and the biopsy took 4 weeks. And then I finally met with my oncologist, Dr. Lawrence Cloud out of Boston. And I came in his office and he was standing up and he greeted me with a handshake and we met eye to eye. And he just asked a very simple question, nonchalantly, very casually. He said, Dan, how did such a young man such as yourself get into the business of cancer? That was when I found out I actually had cancer. So
Interesting how
moment,
he phrased that too. He asking you how you.
yeah, Hollywood couldn't have scripted this any better for my
Right.
divine purpose. So I took that question and put it inward. And I said, how did I get into the business of cancer? What was it that I've been doing that led me here? So immediately what happened was my mind said, wow, if you were more Christ-like, would you be here? And I said, no. I mean, I screamed it internally, no.
Mm-hmm.
So don't take this as a religious thing. That was just words that I grew up in under a Catholic home, and I heard it, and from churches or whatever. But what that really meant was I was not living my true authentic self. And what does that mean? So true authentic self means I did not take responsibility to be the creator and author of my own life. That means I was living an ignorant and arrogant life. So where's the illness? The illness is I'm living an ignorant and arrogant life. What does that mean? So the question kept going deeper into, I was doing things knowingly they were not good for me. That's just as easy as it gets. I know I'm doing things that are not healthy and for my well-being. They're for my ego. They're there for me to fit in with my peers and be accepted by my peers. I'm cool. The immature chicks and girls will like me better because I'm harming myself. I'm tough. I'll show you how tough I am. And then how I manipulated the world, right? So the psychological aspect was how I manipulate the world to get what I wanted. Because that's the game. That was the game, is get what you want. And so manipulate the world, just like the 2-year-old manipulates the parent to get the lollipop. They'll dramatize their banging their head. They'll dramatize enough to get the candy or the ice cream, if that's how you were taught. So that's what I was taught. If I was tiny or small, if I hurt myself, if I cried or whined enough, I would get the candy. And I was a candy junkie. That's how that's how I was raised, on American sad diet of sugar cereal. Or I remember times when I would just take my finger and lick my finger and put it in a sugar bowl and eat that sugar just for a half hour. That was bad. And so anyway, to make a long story short, after that eternal moment with Dr. Lawrence Cloud, I had recognized that I had some control in this and I had something to do with this. Right. And then I said, wow, if I can create an illness, I can create a wellness, but I have to answer the question. So he said, Dan, with a little bit of suffering, you will grow stronger. It's amazing, because what that meant was entering the pain is a lot less painful than resisting it or medicating from it. Right? That means follow your truth back to your true nature, back to your Christ-like, back to your Buddha-like, back to your God-like. Have faith and start to navigate through the choices you made in the past, but you're going to have to go through those doors again and make a different choice. So it's a reversal of those choices that I made in the past. I have to make those choices moving forward and make better choices to get stronger in the spirit of what's in the driver's seat, which is that spirit that drives the mind to make choices that ends in a result that you want. So that was the process in that moment. And it was shockingly liberating and fearful at the same time, because I had no mentor. I had nobody to talk to about that, because everybody was born into the same sort of program I was in, because those were my friends and family members. And I didn't have anyone to really stand on. I just had to rely on my own self in some ways. So, of course, chemotherapy and radiation. Chemotherapy was the standard protocol at that time. And in my mind, I said, wow, that's interesting, because chemotherapy doesn't answer the question at all. right? How did you get into the business of cancer? I didn't have enough chemotherapy growing up. It doesn't answer the question. You see?
Yeah.
So if it doesn't answer the question at its highest level, at its highest etiology, then it's only a temporary fix. And at best. So I said, wow, that's going to buy me the time to start to unwind and try to answer this question. And of course, I had 5 more relapses, bone marrow transplants, radiation. I had to go into the deepest parts of suffering in order to really anchor in on what the answer to cancer is, right? And so at one point, I finally left the medical model in 2000. And that's when my work as a civil engineer / environmental engineer started to pour through. So I left the psychiatric ward because I wanted to kill myself. The pain, it was the duality of wanting to be liberated and the struggle of my humanness, you know, and it was this polarity that was going on. Well, anyway, I left the psych ward and I went home and I had tumors all through my body.
Are you being serious about the psychiatric ward?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's intense.
No, I went to a gun club to kill myself, and it liberated me. So it was an interesting moment. I think people would be inspired to hear this because it's important in the context of our world right now.
Right.
So I was suffering internally between spirit and human. You know, who's going to win out, my ego or this part that said, if I grow stronger, if I enter the pain, that part of me will grow stronger. So this was a conflict, and they were treating me for bipolar, and that the medications were making that stronger, that polarity stronger. And I went into the gun club that I wanted to kill the pain, right? It's not that I wanted to end life. Nobody wants to end their life. Right. They want to end the pain. And we haven't had any life skill training or societal community support to help with the life skills to move through the pain in a different way, except for medications and wanting to kill the pain, essentially. So it was psychological pain. So I went into the gun club and I got the gun, and it was a really interesting scene because nobody was in the club. Nobody was in the gun range. So I took the gun and I had this little conversation where I put the gun to my throat. I was like, in my mouth, I'm like, oh, dude, don't do that. You'll probably live through it. You've lived through cancer 5 times. You'll probably live through this, and it'll be worse off. Shoot your medulla oblongata. So that's the point behind the lump of knowledge on your bone, on your skull here. And if you angle it about 22 degrees up, you'll hit the medulla oblongata, and it kills you instantly. So it's the only place in surgery that can't be touched by surgery, essentially, because it's claimed to be the melted god. The medulla oblongata. So anyway, I even had conscious thought of how to do this. So it was, so there was a part of me that was still really awake. And then internally I had this dialogue going, you ain't going to do it. You're too much of a coward. I'll show you. Like there was then the other part. I'll show you. I'm tough. I'm rough. I can do this. No, you can't. And this conversation went back and forth for several minutes. And then this other third party came in and said, hey, if you two are going to argue, why don't you just shoot the target, try to hit the target. And the two of them said, sure, that sounds good, right? So I aimed so profoundly at the target that my focus became so hyper-focused on that target that it just built up and it just filled the whole room. And all the duality went away. There was no pain, there was nothing. It was just this humorous, giddy sense of self and this high intelligence that was just present with me. I shot all the bullets into the target. And then I came back and I looked at the gun and I said, wow, here's the paradox. Guns don't kill people. This gun just saved my life. It saved my soul right now. It's the suffering internally that is killing people. And it's expressed outward. So any war that I had going on inside of me has to be expressed outward. So I realized that there's only one war. There's no wars going on outside. It's all internally that needs to be expressed externally. So I said, wow, okay, that's a profound feeling. And I just need to keep a pathway to identify with that part of me in that gun club. So I went psychotic
Wow.
again. 2 days later, I went psychotic because I was back in Kansas and nobody, who am I going to talk to about that experience? Right. So I went into the psych ward and I said, look, I know the answer to my problem right now. I need to love myself, but I need help doing that. And that self is the self that showed up at the gun club that saved my soul.
Mhm.
I have to love that self. Can you help me? And they turned to me and said, that's your mental illness talking. We need to modify your medication. So in lockdown, now when I go in there, I'm in there on my own accord, but you're in there for a minimum of 7 days lockdown, and they are in charge of your health and well-being. And I said, wow, they're in charge of my health. They didn't hear me. They didn't hear the spirit that showed up in the gun club, because that's not the model.
Mhm.
That model doesn't listen to that. It doesn't know that. It can't know that. So when I was in there 2 days later, my cancer came back for the 6th time, because I felt like such a societal abandonment and rejection, and the immense amount of personal anger that was for the system, for the people too, that were buying into a system that lacks any spirit. You know, and so then I was crying at night, and I ran to one of the nurses like 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, what do I do? What do I do to get the hell out of here? Just get me out of here. This is not what I need. It's not going to help me. So he said, look, you just got to do what they say. You got to tell them what they want to hear. And I'm like, oh, I'm a master at that. I knew that back when Dr. Lawrence Cloud asked me, how did I get in the business of cancer? I was a master at manipulating the world to get what I wanted. So I was like, all right, back in my acting shoes. So 7 days later, I got out, and thankfully, but they took my supplements. They took my protein powder. They wouldn't let you take them. They just wanted you to have your medication, you know?
Yep.
So, and at one point, I remember one guy was suffering with pancreatic cancer, really painful, and he was crying and in pain. And I went over to him and I just started massaging his back. And I said, look, you know, I got it. You're in pain. Let's just see where it goes. Just put your attention on my hands and just where I'm rubbing your back. And finally, a nurse was running down the hall saying, let go, don't touch him. You can't touch anyone. You got to understand, that's the system, right?
Mhm.
Non-touch, like, because that person might bite you, you know, or they might go angry. So they ship him off to go get shock treatment as though that's really, but his tears started to ease up, you know, he just felt like he was felt, you know, and heard. So I really knew that system for me was a fear-based model, not a love-based model, which is what I was there for. So I would say that people are listening right now, no matter where you are on your path right now, self-love is the only absolute love, and it's the answer to all your problems. It's not you're going to get away from pain in this life. It makes pain different. You get to transcend the pain. You get to find a way out of the suffering rather than being tied into or tangled in its web, as identified as the pain and suffering. Instead, you're in charge of it in some ways, and you have resources and life skills that you can navigate beyond it. And that's what we need more in life right now. So 5 months later, I left the medical model. 5 months later, I applied a philosophy to follow, and I got rid of the tumors. So here we are. And it does bring up the toxicity issue.
Right.
Yeah, it brings up the toxicity issue where I was at home for the first week, and I was studying Eckhart Tolle's work, The Power of Now. And so I would basically read, write, and meditate. And during those meditations, that's when information from being a civil engineer / environmental engineer came into play. I remember being on a site, a Superfund site, which is the highly toxic federal site that you have to clean up. And we would go and assess the damage of the toxicity. So we would drill down to every 5 feet or 2.5 feet down to bedrock, and we'd measure the toxicity all the way down to bedrock, and we'd measure the water.
So explain a Superfund site, because I'm very familiar with Superfund sites.
Yeah.
My husband was in the Greenfield Superfund sites in California. Explain to them what this is so they understand.
So it's essentially a corporation that had land, typically near rivers. And what they did is they arrogantly, because they knew what they were doing to save for profit, arrogantly dumping their toxins into the soil or into the rivers, to the point where it started to really affect the local community at large, in the water table and other lands, and obviously sea and air creatures. And it basically was a problem to that community. So the federal government had to step in and say, we got to clean this up because of pressure, political, from the people, essentially, right? It was the people that were driving this. So that meant that we had to come onto this, whatever, this one was about 120 acres.
Where
right
was
on the
it?
river. It was in, I'm going to watch this, Glen George, I think, in New York.
Oh,
Is
New
it-
York State?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It was right along the a river,
Hudson?
River,
Oh,
way
lovely.
up, way up.
Yeah, they have a lot of problems still up there, but I'll let you go on. Okay.
Yeah. And so that was all basically, it was a company, that land was all about colors for paint, for
Oh.
all your plastics and everything so all those cadmiums, arsenics, all the yellows, blues, anything you see was basically pools of them all over the land.
Oh my God.
And they just thought that the liners would be enough, right? So we had to assess the land. And in my meditations, I was like, wow, we used to drill down through the earth into the bedrock. And I was like, wow, the earth is the soil. And my digestive system is the soil. It should mirror those. So my rational thinking, my engineering mind went to make the connection that the soil was in me and that my soil was probably toxic. So how am I going to assess the internal part of myself? And I said, whoa, wait a minute. Now it came out that I was I said, I must be toxic. And then one of the engineers had talked about bringing enzymes and bacteria on to digest some of the toxins. So I'm like, whoa, that makes sense to me. Maybe I'm bacterial deficient. And then I realized I had a low grade phobia of germs from my bone marrow transplant that was programmed into me, that they killed the whole immune system. You better be careful, all this stuff. So I said, wow, entering the pain is a lot less painful than resisting it. So I had to enter that pathway. And it really dawned on me that most people with chronic degenerative diseases of modern living have a phobia of germs and the germ theory that germs cause their illness. Right? So the germs don't cause toxic waste to be dumped onto the soil like this company did. No, it's a response to the toxicity. So I said, I'm definitely toxic. 3.5 years of chemotherapy, a very aggressive lifestyle prior to that. So I'm toxic. So I have to find a mentor. And I found a mentor. He said, you have to do a recolonization of your colon. So that's what I did, a probiotic implant. I cleaned out the colon. And I did a probiotic implant to start getting the bacteria count up. And soon, right after I did that, the tumor started to shrink.
So you did that, and you had that's your personal experience with chemical exposure on the Superfund sites, correct?
But that was the first time I would be recognizing that I was uncomfortable being on that site. I was uncomfortable. So I already knew that this isn't really comfortable, but I was prostituting myself for a paycheck.
Right. On top
Which
of,
a lot of people do, right?
Yep. And on top of trying to recover from cancer and chemotherapy. And
this was prior. This was all the Superfund site was what led to the cancers, right?
Oh, that was prior to the
yeah. And so this is what I was saying before about how that it came back in my mind in 2000 about how did I treat that and make the connection there to how to clean me up. Heal me. If I can heal the earth, how can I heal me? I am the earth. I am the water.
That's a great analogy. I mean, we are, yep, exactly.
Right. So that came full circle where I was like, well, the earth is the digestive system. So the earth, if it's not fertile, then guess what? You're not going to be fertile. And guess what's really on the rise is infertility because of all the toxicity, right? And also the offspring are having a much harder time now than ever before in terms of living the full potential of its God-given ability as a superhuman being, a super divine being. They're losing that ability radically as we can tell by the autistic spectrum. And this is not to be offensive to people that have children that are in that spectrum. This just means that I'm saying in my world, that means somewhere we're going the wrong way. And that means toxicity is definitely at a focal point that's contributing to this problem. But we also have to say, who's putting the toxins in? So that's why you have to expand out. It's not the toxins, it's the ignorance and arrogance and the world that we've created and that we're living in, that you might be marginalized if you don't do those things, right? You'll get the scarlet letter, you'll get, because you're not following the program, so to speak. So you're gonna have to take some punches and insults if you don't do that, especially if you have children. Forget it. That's when you'll find out how coercive this process is to get toxic in you, and so I then said germs do not cause illness. And that's the first moment when I started to really investigate viruses, parasites, bacteria, fungus as healers, if they come from nature. If they come from man, then there's a problem. The problem isn't what they created, it's the man that's the problem.
Right.
That way we have to be one step ahead and healthy nowadays, because man is out of control with his ignorance and arrogance, out of control. And so we need to be way ahead of that curve with our health and well-being in order to be a better human being today for our family, for ourselves, for the community, etc. We have to be way ahead. It's harder to be spiritually oriented today than ever before.
And there's another element in here, which you and I both know, is the money behind the chemicals that are affecting so many lives, and where that stands. But that is a huge issue when it comes to removing chemicals from your life, because you have to take, in my opinion, you have to take your health into your own hands, as you did, by removing these toxins from your life.
Certainly the first step is to remove, first of all, let's help people understand this. There's obviously biochemical toxicity, there's psychological toxicity, and there's spiritual toxicity, which is really apathy, which says, well, it is what it is. I can't do anything about it. Right there, that's a spiritual toxic thought process, because you've given up your power to something else, and that's not the way of the hero. And that's the hero's journey, is to get back into that saddle and ride the horse and guide the horse. So, and money is an issue because people think that the healthcare is there to care for their health, and therefore it's paid for somehow, right? Magically paid for. But people don't realize how expensive it really is. You pay your premium, you pay your copay. Some people have deductibles before you even get healthcare. Then the insurance companies actually dictate what you get for healthcare, what they pay for. So now what's happening is they're paying for their healthcare, but then they have to go alternatively, and then they have to pay out of pocket alternatively. So it's like a double whammy. And so it's hard for them to validate it and justify it, because it doesn't immediately gratify their quality of life. Like, it doesn't show up as immediate, as something that was a good investment, as, whatever, a good cocktail with their girlfriends on Thursday night. That's good money spent, because they got immediate gratification, they got validation, they got heard, they had emotional bonding. And so when you say, no, take the money away from that and don't do those things, because that's toxicity and that's poisoning, get a good night's sleep. And then they're like, oh man, now it's going to take a month or two to get their sleep cycle back. It's not immediate. So the toxicity issue is, when I talked earlier about it with you, was about the three environments that you have to take a look at, right? And you could go from the inward, outward, or outward, inward. It doesn't matter. Both are the same way. So you got the environment that you're in that has toxicity. So that environment has to be cleaned up, feng shuied, as you might want to call it. And And that's where the psychological energy is as well. So you have to clean up the psyche in there. So it's the chemicals, you don't need them. You don't need any of them. None of them. You really don't. There's whatever I'm sure you have products coming out. You must have products because for people to have cleaning agents or something they want to clean. The only reason why we clean is for the germs. Mm-hmm. But if you're not afraid of the germs, all you need is hot water. It's the best solvent in the world. That's all you really need.
Totally.
But if you're cooking food, which we can get into later, if you're cooking food, all the fat that's cooked you need a suffocant to get that off because of the cooking denatures and damages the food. So if you actually had raw butter on a plate, you can just rinse it with hot water and it's clean and it's done. But if you cook the butter and it's on the plate, you have to have a soap of some kind to collect it and carry it out and chelate it, so to speak, because it was cooked, because you damaged the molecules of that food. It's a very interesting thing to note. And so the same thing goes if you eat a lot of cooked food, it's the same thing inside the body. You're going to need solvents to help strip that down. Same thing. If you eat it raw, the body, it burns cleaner. It's not as toxic or non-toxic. So that's the first environment, what you're in, where you're living in. And that includes every single room has its own environment, your car, your garage, your junk drawers, like you name it, your medicine cabinet, like the list under the kitchen sink, your refrigerator. I mean, I could tell what's going on in a person's body, mind, just by the refrigerator. You know, how
that's such a good point.
How cellularly toxic they are is how jammed their freezer and how psychologically you're living in lack, meaning I better have enough food because it might run out, you know, it's just so, and then they look at it and they go, I don't have anything to eat. So then there's the when you come in, now it's what you put on your skin is the second environment. Right? So meaning whatever you put on your skin, you're consuming 60 to 80% of it, depending on the molecule size of what you're putting on, how hot you are, because if you're warmer, obviously it's going to seep into the pores. Hot showers with your fluoridated water, forget about it. That's going in rapidly. It's a gas. Now you're in a gas chamber, depending on how hot you put your thing in. So now you've honestly, we've been duped to go to the gas chambers by man, and we love them. Like we love our gas chamber, you know, and nobody thinks twice about getting a decent household water filter or at least a shower filter. So that's going in the system, and then it gets into your bloodstream. And then when it gets into the bloodstream, it goes to the final place. The final environment is the cell. The cell has to be cleaned of toxins. And it's the cell membrane and all your fat cells, right? Because that's what stores it. So your cell membranes, your nervous system, all the cells around your nervous system, the membrane, that's where it's going to hold the toxins. Even inside the cell with the organelles are going to hold the toxins in their membranes, and they're very vulnerable. I mean, the body's very sensitive. Just think of a baby. We're very sensitive, hypersensitive, in fact, but we've been dumbed down. So the toxins have to be removed from the environment so that the toxins from the bloodstream can have a place to start to circulate, and then you can get to the cells, and obviously the lymphatic system and blood system are the same, or not same, but they have the same metrics in terms of importance of detoxifying. There is a rule of thumb that toxins move from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. So that means when you clean your house out, your psyche gets cleaner because there's room for the psyche to get cleaner now. Right. And then when your psyche gets cleaner, you start thinking, I better start eating better and putting things on my body better and putting in my body. And then when the blood starts to when the digestive tract gets cleaned up, the blood gets cleaned up. Then it relieves the lymphatic system. Then the lymphatic system, as that gets cleaned, then the cells could say, hey, I can start dumping the trash out of the cell. And so higher concentration of chemicals will always seek a lower concentration. So if your household is really messed up, full of toxins, you could do everything in the world and not get better because the toxicity is still coming in through the environment. And so we want to do that and clean up the house. And, you know, grateful that there's folks like yourself and several others that are literally not just cheerleaders, but like George Washington on a horse to get the battle. Because I can imagine in your world, if you're going into a household, what you're seeing is a war,
Yeah, it is.
a chemical warfare.
It is. That's what I feel like when I walk into some people's homes and somebody tells me they have cancer, and it's just breaks my heart. And I just want to bring something up that you touched on a little bit, because detoxification.
Yeah.
We hear this all the time, and it's detoxing is overused, but you kind of touched on it for people to understand. In order to clean up the three things that he mentioned is you have to really clean up your home, your environment of where you're living before you can really even detox.
Think about it this way. You want to have an example?
Yeah.
So think about it this way: a domesticated, violent woman, a violated woman. She shows up Friday. Her husband beats her Friday, Saturday nights when he's drinking, right? Do you think any amount of supplements is going to make that change? Or any cleanse, like a juice cleanse?
Absolutely
no, she's
not.
got to clean up. She's got to clean up the environment she's in. She has to remove herself from the environment, or she has to get the toxic out of the environment before she can really actually benefit from a cleanse or a deeper cleanse. So we have to identify what is our biggest toxicity that's affecting us right now. And if there's 1,000 things, then we just start with one. Like Jordan Peterson says, just start with a junk drawer, clean one up. Just start with your closet, clean it out. Just start with under your kitchen sink, get rid of them and replace, just do it one thing every week. And in 1 year, you've done 52 things. That's 104 change. That's a double change because you're not toxic and you're getting rid of them. So, yeah, I just wanted to mention that you really have to dig deep to not buy into this story that you have to get rid of the germs,
right?
And kill the germs.
Exactly.
Just like your house, you have plants everywhere, right?
Yeah, plants everywhere.
That's your toxic air cleaner.
I am constantly wanting clean air. I personally, we have air purifiers. Personally, we have air quality monitors, so I know what air I'm breathing. People don't understand how important this is to their overall well-being, and coming from you knowing that it is so important. Everything you're putting on your body, in your mind, around you constantly, the second you wake up to the second you go to sleep, is so important. Now, coming from Dan, I have a question for you, because coming from somebody that's had cancer 6 times, from somebody that thinks that they've cleaned up their life, or they like, why is the cancer coming back? I didn't smoke. I think it's hard for me to help people. They really have to look at all aspects of their life. And you're bringing this up to a great point about this today. It's not just a piece here and a piece there. You have to look at everything. And I've interviewed other people just like you. Ginny Dent, I don't know if you know Ginny Dent, but she wrote a book, and she had stage 4 breast cancer. And it was about, and I'm gonna use the word detox, but it was about detoxing her entire life, her mind, her body, her cupboards, everything in her home.
Everything's got to go.
Bathroom cupboards, shampoo, lotions, you name it.
And
deodorant, right?
Oh my God, yeah. And personal care items for women is off the chart. That's like, for a chemical coming into a person, like how many years did you put that stuff on your body?
Right.
This is what I said. It's double down. It's life or death in some ways, in the sense that you can still merely exist as you get older, but how do you want to live? I'm all about living healthy all the way up into longevity, and that's what we're designed for. And as a silly stat, all mammals, land mammals, they live 5 to 7 times their maturation age. And for humans, that's between 22 and 25 years old. So we should be cruising into 125 to 160, 170 as a longevity marker, just as a human being, never mind if you put spiritual mojo in there, right? And so when someone says, I live to 80 years old, you cut yourself in half. You shouldn't be proud. You just cut your life expectancy in half based on just pure biology. So I think what you're trying to say is with the cancer patients, it's overwhelming, and they're already in a state of fear of dying because of the nature of what cancer represents. And then they're under the fear from their medical model saying, you got to do this now, right? Because Lord knows there's nothing else you can do. Wow, what a great strategy from a business model that you talked about, right? And so that's their ignorance and arrogance, not offering other alternatives or just relaxing and saying, all right, it's cancer. All right. Okay. That's not the issue. Unless it's life threatening and it's, struggling to, block an artery or create blockages in your bowels. All right. I got it. I mean, there's definitely acute things that might have to use medicine for, but not from the burn and poison model. But if you have to do a surgery to save blood vessels or whatever, that's fine. But what if we just said, wait a minute, okay, it's cancer. So what, again, coming back to what this woman said about Jenny, what was her last name? Dent? Jenny Dent,
Oh,
right?
Jenny Dent. Yeah.
Yeah. So she basically said, I have control over certain things that I know I've been doing, that I can start today and start letting go of those things. Now, if a person has a hard time of letting go, guess what? You're going to hold on to that cancer to your grave.
Correct.
If you can't let go, if you can't let go of your guilt, if you can't let go of your resentment, you can't let go of loss or grieving, right? If you can't let go, then you're still stuck in your adolescent emotional center. So you haven't matured into a grown adult where we can let go of things that no longer serve us, as long as we have brought to our awareness that it no longer serves us, right?
Yes.
And so people that are sick and they've been sick for a long time, they don't have any energy. So it comes back to, how are we going to get our personal energy back? And who do we know that can help us with our personal energy? Because that's really what at the fulcrum of chronic degenerative disease is you lost your personal energy. And toxicity, obviously, creates nutritional deficiencies. So you're deficient in something and you're excessive in something else. And in my holistic view, something's missing in your life, and something in your life has to go in order for you to grow into a conscious life. And it doesn't mean you need to get rid of the tumors. I want to give an example because I know a friend of the family. She was young, but she was in her mid to upper 20s, and she had lung cancer, but she had a genetic predisposition to something like this. So that means she had to double down on being really clear, or if you're not, you're going to get it. So she got the illness. And so I went over and I talked to her from the spirit point of view. And the beautiful thing about her was that she wound up taking ownership of her cancer. It didn't have fear over her at some point. And to me, that is the success. It's not about getting rid of the tumor. It's about your relationship with that. First and foremost, what is your relationship to? Do you own this? Do you own the things that you've done in your life, consciously or unconsciously, to create this situation? And therefore, you're doing whatever you can in your own conscience and consciousness to rise above it. That's a key thing. And you can definitely get rid of the toxins. I get it. If you get rid of all your toxins and you still have cancer, you think you haven't won the game. That's not true. That's not true. If an alcoholic gets rid of his alcohol, he still has problems in his life, he thinks he's still a failure, but that's not true. It's just that you've set yourself up for a mountain that you haven't climbed yet. And so you have to take the mountains that you did climb and conquered and move to the next one and get stronger within that, what we were saying before, in the true self. Just get stronger in that. It's a spiritual issue. Everything becomes a spiritual issue of, wow, I have control over certain choices that will bring a certain result. It might not be immediate, but it will be down the road. I know for sure when anyone vacuums out their car and cleans their car, they think their car feels great. We're like, wow, what if you did that with your home? What if you did that with your body? What if you did that with your mind by sitting in stillness and silence for a half hour every day and self-reflect? So, I think a part of me feels a little angry at society at some point. It's like,
Me too.
I don't know.
Oh yeah.
You know what I
get
mean?
that. Yeah,
I do.
absolutely.
I just feel like my passion comes out as somewhat angry that I had to go through all this suffering, and now, all right, I'm grateful that I have a second opportunity. But people say, "Wow, you cured your cancer," and I'm saying, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! Do you see the world we're living in? Cancer's in the conscious field. It's everywhere, kid. It's in the psychic field. Don't you get that? I haven't made any marginal difference in cancer because it's still part of a medical system. There's still cancer wards open. People are getting diagnosed at 3,000 people a day. So look at, just because someone gets it and then maybe lasts another year or two, that's not my goal. My goal is to make sure hospitals shut down. Then I know we're going in the right direction. We're going in the direction of nature. But man, at its utmost chaotic and, I don't know, idiotic, is they're trying to make you believe that anything that's nature or natural is bad for you. And anything that is man-made and industrial made and, stamped by the FDA is good for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's crazy. That's the lunacy that we're in. And so you've bought into that and programmed into it. So you have to shift that. And that could be really painful because you have to let go of a whole entire world that you've been believed in. So I know I interrupted you.
No, that's
sorry.
okay. That's okay. You got my mind going to somebody that said on my podcast once, could you imagine if the food, all organic food wasn't labeled, but all the food that has chemicals in it were labeled, the chemical foods, and then all the foods that didn't have labels on it were organic food? That's the mindset we want people to understand. That organic food is nature. That's the way we should all be eating, not out of a box, not preservatives, not pesticides. Those are not the real food. The real food is the organic food. That was just popped into my mind.
I'll share you the story about that then,
Yeah.
because in '95, when my bone marrow transplant, when my bone marrow transplant failed after 6 weeks. It was a success in the sense that I got rid of the tumors, but then 6 weeks later, it started coming back. And then my wife at the time, they wanted to do more chemo, of course, right? And I was like, I don't know, my soul is dead. That was an 8-month process. It was very aggressive. These things were raging back. I was a pretty athletic kid, and I was strong, and I was cocky, and you name it. But that really wore me down. And at that point, she just grabbed me and she just like, look, you got to do it. I think her fear of me dying allowed her to put all of her personal energy into me. And my apparent love for her was able to receive it. And I said, all right, I need to change my diet and exercise seriously if I'm going to go do this. Now, listen to me, folks. Diet and exercise is everything, but you have to understand the two. And I'm going to share with you because I think this is very important. So it was a week later, I got my first book called The Zone Diet, and about the 40-30-30 principle, and really cutting the carbohydrates and the sugar. If you think your chemicals in your cabinet are problematic, you should think of the sugar as well. Sugar and seed oils, especially combined, are the most damaging to your cell membrane than anything else on the planet when they're combined and into your metabolic system. And so cancer has been well regarded as a metabolic illness. It's an issue in the metabolism. And so those two things damages metabolism beyond anything else. And more people are more sensitive to it than others, of course. And it can be expressed as cardiometabolic illness, or it could be metabolic syndrome, but they all come from the same place. Cancer, heart disease, and diabetes are all from the same place. So That's a metabolic illness, and or disease or disorder is probably a better word. It's just that it's not running smoothly. Think of your automobile, putting along, blowing out black oil out the tailpipe. You'd say, oh, I better go to the mechanic. Well, yeah, well, your body's probably doing that, but you're not sensitive. You've medicated yourself so you don't feel that. I get that. So back to this story, I finally said diet and exercise, but I wanted to bring it full circle that everyone is on a diet. You cannot avoid being on a diet. So if anyone's teaching you to not worry about diet, everyone is on a diet. It just doesn't mean the diet's nourishing. It's either malnourishing or nourishing. It doesn't go either way. And so you want to think of terms of every time you feed yourself, drink something, breathe something, is this nourishing me? Because you need nourishment. A cancer patient needs nourishment. That's a fact. And then you have to learn what that means, because you've learned how to malnourish yourself probably pretty well, like I did. And then movement. Exercise is a component of movement, but movement is more important than exercise. So if you're nourished, you'll move across the plane of earth in a certain way. You'll be giddy, you'll be light, you'll be generous, you'll be kind. And it's easy when you're nourished. It's super easy. And I'm sure everyone has had a day like that where they just felt like, wow, today I just feel like singing, and doing the chores or something. So that's when you feel nourished, and you move in a certain way. And then that movement becomes nourishment. And you're in a cycle of regeneration, rejuvenation, and rebuilding yourself. So to restore that cycle, you have to get out of the one that you're doing, which is you're causing yourself to be malnourished. And then your exercise or movement is either sedentary, or it's the wrong type of exercise or movement for you. And you're just trying to train your ego so that you have a six pack, a big chest, or a big butt, or a tight thighs, or whatever. You're not really understanding movement as medicine. Okay. And so you're in a process of self-abuse. You're in a process of destruction, essentially. And that's the wheel of suffering that the Buddha had alluded to. The wheel of suffering is I chase pleasure at all costs, and I avoid my pain at all costs. And so people become addicted to the pleasure, and they become addicted to the pain, and that's the cycle. And so I have to help people consciously bring awareness to that, so you can consciously heal that by getting into the other cycle, which is, how do I nourish myself? Take a hot bath, like you said, less toxins. Just keep pulling them out. It might take you 3-4 years to pull them all out, but if you're a type A personality, it would take you a week. Right. You'd be like, done. It's affecting my kid. Mama bear comes up. I'm a type A personality. Done. And if you're not on board with it, you're out. And that's what I had to do. I had to actually say diet and exercise. I had to get that in line. And then I started to I used my engineering background to start taking things apart so I could see it, so I could become aware, right? I recorded my diet really well to see, what am I doing? And awareness is what's scary, because awareness is what makes you objective, and you're no longer hiding in your subjective emotionality. And then your higher reasoning can access power of choice, so you can create better results. Otherwise, if you're at the whim of your emotional subjectivity, you're basically stuck in your emotionality, which is teenagers. It's less than teens, just around hormonal years, right? You're stuck in your emotionality. And the only thing you're concerned about is how well you fit in with your peers, right? So you can't reparent yourself. It's very hard. So then you try to have someone else become your parent, your surrogate parent outside of you. I hate to say it, but you and I might at some point feel like we're their parent. Like, pick up your socks, throw out that trash, throw out that junk that's poisoning you. And you have to keep telling them, because they're stuck in their emotional subjectivity. They're not objectively in their higher reasoning. And I'm hopefully not pointing fingers or being offensive. I'm just trying to share with you the pathway that I had to cross, and the numerous hours I've spent internally assessing my own self, so that I could share that with people.
Absolutely. Your story is just amazing. And I know we could sit here and talk for 3 more hours because there's so much information. And so I'm so grateful for you to come on here today, Dan. And I know that there was other stuff we wanted to cover, but is there any last comment that you would like to touch on? And I know everybody can, in the show notes, can find Dan on his social media, on his Facebook and podcast. I'll put that all in there. Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. He's got his own website. So that will be in there as well. But any closing points that you would like to still
yeah, I think when things are overwhelming, we have to break it down to bite sizes, right? So
true.
And you have to really get that serenity prayer going in terms of, you have to really release all things that are going on and just focus on the things that you can have control of. And that's really important to you right now. So if your health and well-being is important to you, then you have to break it down to what is one thing today, right now, after this podcast that you listen to, what is one thing that you can take from your cupboard, from your closet, from whatever, and just go through the letting go process. Let it go. And then use T's forum to learn how you can clean up the toxicity in your house. It's not as hard as you think. I mean, I even took out this thing, the soap nuts. That's my laundry detergent.
Laundry detergent. Yeah, a lot of people don't know about those.
Yeah, they don't know. Soap nuts are just a tree nut that the Native American Indians found had saponins in there that you could clean your clothes, and they work. So you don't need chemicals to kill the germs in your clothes. Hot water will do it fine, but you don't even need to kill them. And so that's my sense of the concept is start to look at your home and bring awareness to the things that are malnourishing you.
Right.
Just do that. Just be aware of it and take ownership that I know that I'm making this choice and malnourishing myself. Really take ownership of it so that you can access a power and say, now what? I'm doing this to myself. I'm doing this to my kids. I'm doing this to their kids because I'm setting a program in play on how to live, right? Now, I was grateful for my parents. They showed me how to live by how not to live. Right. Love your enemy, right? So love thy enemy. That's what that love thy enemy is. If there's an enemy out there that you say is you're pointing fingers at, just say, hey, they're showing me how to live by how not to live. Thank you. So just take one thing today. And if you really need further insights or further coaching along the way for your conscious healing, then certainly I'm available for consult and coaching. And you can email me at danhegerich@yahoo.com. And we can do a 30-minute discovery call for any of your listeners that, respond to the podcast. And I wish everyone an absolute heroic path towards coming into self-love and realizing that health is the foundation to life and love is the purpose for living. You don't need to go get a purpose. You're on purpose. Love is the purpose. You can do love in anything that you're doing. So if you bring love to your activities, then you're living on purpose or with purpose. That's the purpose for living. It's to transcend your problem spiritually, psychologically, and hopefully biochemically and physiologically. That's your purpose. And then share what you learned in the process so other people can be inspired and get the information and wisdom from you. And we can start this whole process of taking back this world, creating heaven on earth.
Amen. I agree with you on that. And you also, one of the points I always bring up is start small. You don't have to do everything all at once. I'm all about prevention and preventing cancer and other illnesses. So that would be preventing those chemicals coming into your life. Unfortunately, you had to find out the hard way. But thank you so much for being here today, because your insight is going to affect other people's lives. And again, you can find Dan on his website, his 30-minute discovery call, as he mentioned, and all the other information that he offers out there. So Dan, thank you so much. And I really appreciate it.
Many blessings, everybody.
You too. Thank you.